One of the psychiatrists who will be trying to walk through mentalization-based therapy and why that matters in terms of patients. And as part of that, I'll be talking about attachment styles. And this originally is from the work of John Bowlby, who was a psychoanalyst. He was actually underneath the Kleinian school, but then left psychoanalysis to try to develop a different theory that was more based in evolutionary ideas, neurodevelopment, and incorporating kind of scientific, rigorous research. These ideas were left by the psychoanalytic community for many years until they were picked up by Fonagy about 20-30 years ago. And then Fonagy, who's a English analyst of the relational school, and then Bateman, who's a psychiatrist in England, who has taken Fonagy's observations as an analyst and transferred them to kind of twice weekly therapy, once as a group, once as an individual, for patients initially with borderline personality organization, and then personality disorder is defined in the DSM-5, as well as antisocial personality disorder. But now we'll be looking at attachment styles, and I need to orient you to my graph. So along the x-axis we have the self, and the self can either be on the left-hand side with the positive green symbol of a positive sense of self, or on the right-hand side with a negative sense of self, and my y-axis is the one's understanding of the other. So that's one pole of the mentalization poles, and in another video I'll kind of go into more detail what I mean by the word mentalization. But of the other pole, so self and other on the y-axis, other is the negative understanding of another, and kind of perceive them as negatively, is at the top of the chart here, and positively perceive others is at the bottom. So using John Bowlby's descriptors, which he related attachment primarily to how the child actually was physically and geographically located to the caregiver, in terms of physical proximity when the caregiver was present and then left. So I'll use those terms, so secure, avoidant, or dismissive, fearful avoidant. People also call this quadrant disorganized, fearful avoidant, or preoccupied. Preoccupied, also known as kind of hyperactivating. There's another word you'll hear, hyperactivating, and it's kind of an attachment strategy, and dismissive attachment strategy, or hypoactivating is another word here. All right, and so just to walk through that, so the secure attachment is going to be both a positive sense of self and a positive belief about others. The avoidant attachment strategy has a positive sense of self, but a negative sense of others, so you stay away from others and dismiss the idea of needing to be in relationship with others. The preoccupied self style has a positive sense of the other, so very concerned about what others think of them, but a negative sense of themselves. So they always want to make sure that they're doing enough, good enough. They may feel worthless, and they need to prove their self-worth. And then the fearful avoidant has both a negative sense of the other, so they stay away and they avoid, and they have a negative sense of themselves. So really kind of a pretty difficult attachment strategy to be engaged in. So the attachment strategies, and why I use that term is so originally in Bowlby's formulation, he thought that once the attachment styles, which were the, again, relationship in which the child had to the mother, once they were formed in early childhood, then these couldn't really be changed. We know that to be incorrect now, and that they can change. And that now what I mean by attachment strategy is that this is the way that the child relates to the caregiver. If I say mother, I mean caregiver. Forgive me. It's just historically the word mother was used, but I mean caregiver, the primary caregiver. It can be male, female, other. Primary caregiver for this individual, and that this is the attachment strategy that they use in order to become close, and that attachment strategy is developed over thousands of interactions with the caregiver. So this is the attachment strategy, and then those attachment strategies lead to what happens when an individual becomes stressed, and how quickly do they go from mentalizing. Again, I'll have a different video that goes into what does it mean to mentalize, mentalizing and utilizing their controlled mentalizing, and when do they go into kind of automatic mentalizing. And you may say, well, why does it matter if you're mentalizing? And the big picture idea there is that genuine mentalizing fosters the capacity for trust and the capacity to benefit from positive features in the environment, so that somebody can learn from the environment and build trust from it. And as all individuals get stressed, which I have here on the x-axis, then mentalizing can become compromised. So you have controlled and automatic mentalizing. Controlled mentalizing is when you use the prefrontal cortex, and you're reflective, you're using that part of the brain that is abstracting and taking other people's perspectives into consideration. Automatic mentalizing is fast. It's posterior cortical and subcortical, and it's often kind of based upon repetition patterns and biases, and so can just get you out of a pinch, and kind of can think of this as kind of fight or flight in other ways of thinking about things. So as stress increases, all people have a point at which they switch from controlled mentalizing to automatic mentalizing. And this switch point can shift up or down, and then you would just imagine the curves here of the controlled mentalizing and automatic mentalizing, similarly moving either left or right along, and that would be kind of a measure of the resilience and stress tolerance of a particular individual, depending upon where that stress point was. And so if you recall our attachment strategies, so these are related to, here we have secure is A, preoccupied B, avoidant C, fearful avoidant D, and those letters are then A, B, C, and D. So secure, hyperactivating, or preoccupied, deactivating, or avoidant. Preoccupied, deactivating, or avoidant, and then disorganized or fearful avoidant. And then the switch point for a secure individual is high, so that means it's shifted to the right, and it takes a fair amount of stress to cause it to activate. The strength of the automatic response is only moderate, meaning that an individual doesn't necessarily jump into a strong fight or flight response, so to speak, and that they can recover back to controlled prefrontal mentalizing pretty fast. The preoccupied individual has a low switch point, so their switch point is shifted to the left. They have a strong automatic response, and they have a slow ability to return to controlled mentalizing. The avoidant individual tends to have a higher switch point shifted to the right. However, they do fail under stress. And their strength of the auto response can seem weak, but it does become strong when under enough stress. So they can also have a fairly robust response if stressed enough. Recovery of control mentalizing is relatively fast. And you may say, well, that seems fairly similar to the secure. However, you'll remember, while this strategy seems to provide them with some benefit, it comes at the cost of not engaging with others. So they lack engagement with others. And then there is the fearful avoidant, where the switch point, it's unclear when it will come about. They have a strong auto response, and they're very slow to return to controlled mentalizing. So the combination of secure attachment and high levels of mentalizing is related to a kind of broaden and build cycle that reinforces feelings of secure attachment, personal agency, and mentalizing. And this is associated with a genuine interest and openness to others and new social information, and allows people access to new social information and context. And that's kind of what Fonagy and Bateman would suggest is kind of the goal of almost any psychotherapy, building kind of secure attachment leading to openness to others so that one can gain new social information from the environment.